Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, and this is the next video wherein we are going to take a look on a new concept in Java which is called as a loop. So loops is something which is quite interesting. If you're a beginner, it's important for you to have an understanding about the loop concept, because this is something which you're going to be requiring all of the time in major of your projects. So this kind of an understanding is required, that how exactly the loops work. So I will be covering up everything about the loops. So starting from the scratch, that what exactly is the syntax, why do we need loops, and what instance do you need a specific kind of loop. So we're going to be covering up all the different types of the loops that we have in Java, and also there's certain instances like at what particular condition, that how exactly a specific loop is going to work. So we're going to be covering up some different cases that we have in loops, and basis on that we will try to understand it in a better way. So without wasting any time, let's get into the system. So yes, talking about the loops. So what do you understand about the loop, right? Loop is something which is required when you need some continuation and some repetition in your project, right? That's when you use the loop. So loop, let's try to understand from this picture. So we have the three different types of the loops: do while loop, and for loop. And also there is a category that we have in for loops which is called as a for each loop. So we're going to be covering up that as well. We will see at what point do we need that. So yes, all of these loops have their own functionalities. We need them basis upon the functionality that we need in our project, in our code, and basis on that we're going to be picking up the best one for us. So we'll be starting from the so this is basically called as the types of loops that we have: while, do while, for, and for each loop. We're going to be covering up all the concepts. So we're going to be starting from the while loop. So while loop, we'll try to understand about the while loop basis upon the syntax that we have, and also how do we use that in the code. So let's go to the Eclipse, and basis on that we will see that how the while loop is going to work. So while loops is quite an interesting one. You need to understand it from the syntax. So so let's try to understand while loop first, and then we'll discuss further. So this is my basically the class which I have made for you, which is loop demo, and over here I'm going to be doing the initialization. I'm going to be initialize a variable which is called as int, right? So I believe so this is the variable that I'm going to be using inside of my code, which is int I as variable, and it is having integer type. So this is my while is going to be the keyword over here that we're going to be using inside of the code in order to use the loops. So in order to understand the syntax, right, I need to mention the condition over here, because loop is going to be working depending upon the condition that you put, right? So let me go to the notepad screen and make you understand first that how exactly the while loop works. So this is my while, right? And over here I'm going to be describing the condition, and basis on that I'm going to be starting my loop, right? So this is what the simple syntax over here for the while loop, and this is how you need to understand. So I'm going to be mentioning my condition over here, and basis on that I'm going to be starting my while loop. So this is going to be the body wherein I'm going to be describing my code, right? And let's see how do we define the condition, and basis on that we're going to be needing some repetition inside of the code. So what I'm doing is I've initialized the variable as I equals to 0, right? And that's the reason I've mentioned the condition. I need my while loop going to be working till the time the value of I is less than 5. As soon as the value of I becomes 5, or it becomes greater than 0, I want to exit from my loop, right? That's what I want. So how do I do that? I'm going to be describing something which I want as the repetition. So what I'm going to be doing over here, I will be just going to be printing the value of this particular I variable that I have described over here. So I will be mentioning this thing over here, the value of I is, and that's what I'm going to be doing, right? So it's going to be repeating till the time the I value is less than 5. So let's see what's going to work. And I also want to increment the value of I every time it's going to be executing the loop. So that means it's going to be this particular body of the code is going to be incrementing the value of I, as well as it's going to be printing the value of I as well. So let's try to run the code, and basis on that we'll discuss further. So let's run the code. So it has gonna be working perfectly fine. Yes. So the I value is starting from the 0. So how exactly the code is working? Look at the initialization that we have done. We have started the value of I starting from the 0, right? If I will change, if I will define this as 2, it's going to be starting the value from 2, right? And over here I have initialized the value as 0. The condition is going to check. As soon as the condition is going to check I is less than 5, it's going to come inside of the body of the code. It's going to be executing the code, incrementing the value over here, and so this is called as the updation. So you need to keep a note of this particular point over here, that I'm doing the updation inside of the while loop itself. That's the reason, and that's how the code is working. So we will see in different types of loops that how exactly we are doing the updation. Over here I'm doing the updation inside of the code. So that's what the point you need to keep remember and keep a note of. So it's going to be incrementing the value over here, and it's again checking the value. Yes, 1 is less than 5. Then again it's going to be printing till the time it's 4. As soon as it becomes 5, 5 is not less than 5, it's going to be exit. It's going to come out of this loop, and yes, the code is going to end. And let's see if I am initializing the variable as 2. So it's going to be starting from 2. It's going to be starting from 2, 3, 4. Yes, after that, once it becomes 5, it's going to come out of this particular loop. So let's try to modify certain things, and basis on that we will see how it's gonna impact our code. So okay, let's do one thing over here. Let's remove this updation operator, and basis on that we will see how it's gonna impact our code. So if I'm just commenting this out, and let's see the output over here. So it keeps on just repeating my while loop, because I'm not incrementing and I'm not updating the value of 5. So it keeps on just checking the condition. Yes, 2 is less than 5, 2 is less than 5, keep on repeating this particular loop, and this is the infinite loop. All right, so that's particular thing that you need to keep a note of. If you don't want to mess up with your code, you don't want your code to be get into this infinite loop, you just need to make sure that you are doing the right things. So let's just terminate this code and proceed further. I'm going to be showing you some specific condition and some particular instance that how exactly it's going to make an impact over here. So what I'm doing is, so you need to understand one thing first. So this while loop has its meaning till this particular point, because I'm starting my while loop over here, and I've just mentioned 2 curly braces over here, and that's where the meaning of the while loop is. It's executing this particular part of the code, which is my while loop. What if I'm just mentioning a semicolon over here? What's the impact it's gonna make to our code? So you just need to understand this in such a way that you are the compiler. Just consider yourself to be as the compiler, and how exactly the code is gonna work now. So as soon as I'm just mentioning this semicolon over here, now the meaning of my while loop is up until this point. This curly braces has no meaning. My while loop is going to come to the end at this point in time. So even if I'm doing the initialization, right? Okay, so let's try to run the code and we will see the difference. So I'm executing my code. It's not printing out anything. The reason is simple. It's checking the condition I less than 5. Yes, it is true. I is 2 and it is less than 5. So it's going inside of the while loop, but it is finding out this semicolon, and that's the reason it's not proceeding further. It's just ending at this point, and it's got stuck. The code is stuck over here. It's not proceeding further. It's not able to find out any body of the code which it has to execute. It's not even coming to this particular point. That's the reason it's not printing the value of 5. So let's suppose if I am just making a twist over here, and I'm checking the condition if I is greater than 5, right? And let's see, and let's try to run the code, and we will see the difference. Okay, so now what is happening? It's finding out that I greater than 5 is a false condition, and it's not just even thinking about this particular semicolon. It's just skipping this particular part of the code, and it's coming to this particular point, which is system.out.println, and it's printing the value of 5, which is 2, right? So that's how, if the condition is not true, it's not going to impact our code. If the condition is false, it's not going to impact our code. If the condition is true, then definitely it's going to execute our while condition, and it's going to execute our loop. So yeah, that's pretty much it about the while loops. It's pretty simple. You just need to define the condition that you want to check, and basis on that you execute the body of your code. So while loop is something which you're going to be executing and which you're going to be using at some particular instances depending upon the functionality that you need inside of your code, and that's where you use it. So let's proceed further, and let's try to come to the second point, and the second type of the loop that we have, which is do while loops. It's quite simple. It's again quite similar to while loops, and Again, it depends upon the functionality that you need inside of your code. Basis on that, you use particular loops. So for do while loop, you have a different type of syntax. Let's try to understand the syntax of the do while loop, and basis on that we will proceed further. So let me just make, okay. So the syntax is pretty simple, right? It's quite similar to do while loop, and you just need to keep a note over here that what's the difference. So do while loop is similar to while loop. The only difference is that the code is going to execute at least for once, even if the condition is false. So that's the main difference in between do while loop and the while loops. And also talking about the condition check, it is done at the end. That's the reason it executes the code even if the condition is false at least for once. So that means the syntax is simple. You just give the order that you want to do and perform this particular task, which is the body of your code, at least for once, and then you check for the condition. Then you mention your while condition. You want this to be while this is going to be working till the time the condition is true. So let's just go back to the screen wherein we have to mention the code and see the difference. So I'm doing the same code. I'm just performing the same thing, and I'm initializing the value of I from 2, and I'm executing the same thing. I'm gonna be just printing out the value of I over here, and I'm gonna be incrementing this time. I'm gonna be updating the value of, so I want the condition to be as I greater than 5, which is a false condition, right? So let's proceed with the code and see the difference over here. So yes, the condition is false, right? Still, it is executing my code at least for once, right? That's the main difference over here of talking about the do while loops and the while loops. So let's try to make it. Let's try to just go back to the same condition, which is I less than 5, which is true, and then we will see the output is going to be the same, right? Yeah, that's the main difference, right? So it's going to be printing out the same output which was there in the previous case when we were discussing about the while loop. So that's the main difference. It's quite simple, and it's going to be requiring at some particular instance wherein you need some specific functionality. That's the only case when you use the do while loops. And yes, the output is going to be same. Yeah, so that's pretty much it about the do while loops. And yeah, let's proceed further, discuss about the for loop, which is going to be the main loop, I would say, which is going to be using that to be on the major of the times and in major of your projects. So let's go back to the presentation and we will see some particular things. Basis on that, we will try to understand this in a better way. So coming back to the point which I wanted to mention, what is the difference between the for and the while loop? So the major difference, I would say, that for loop is something which is required at the time when you know the repetitions which you need in your code. When you know the iterations that you need in the code, that's when you use the for loop. And talking about the while loop, you just don't worry. You just don't want to worry about the condition check. You don't want to, you don't need to worry about the repetitions. That you just want to mention the condition. That's when you use the while loop. So you don't know how many iterations, how many repetitions are there inside of the code. You just want to worry about the condition check, and that's where you just want to be free, right? And that's when you use the while loops. And the second thing that I want to keep a point over here, that if the condition is not put up in the for loop, so we will see that how we mention the condition. So if the condition is not mentioned inside of the for loop, then the loop is going to execute for infinite number of times. So you need to make a check that you have mentioned the condition, otherwise the for loop is going to work for infinite number of times. But yes, talking about the while loop, the condition is something which is necessary. If you just miss out mentioning the condition inside of your while loop, then the compiler is going to give you the error. So that's the main difference, right? That's the point that you need to keep a note of. So let's proceed further, talking about the for loops, right? So you need to understand the syntax first, and basis on that we'll proceed further. So for loops, you do the initialization. So it's having a specific syntax other than that, like which we have discussed previously while in the do while loops. So it's having a different types of the syntax. You do the initialization. It's not mandatory, but yes, you have the option to do the initialization inside of the for loop. Talking about the condition check, Condition is something which is required over here with the specific syntax. The middle part is going to be the condition check, and we're talking about the updation. So when I mentioned about that, this is the point that you need to keep a note of. So for while loops, we were doing the updation inside of the body of the code, right? Over here, you need to do the updation over here. So updation is something which is again not necessary, but yes, if you do the updation, you have an option to do the updation inside of the for loop itself. You can also do the updation inside of your code. That's something which you can do. There is no, there is no difference, but yes, you do have an option to do the updation over here. So let's try to understand how exactly the code is going to work at this point in time. So the very first thing it's going to do is the initialization of the variable. It's going to do the initialization, then it's going to check for the condition. If the condition is going to be true, then it simply going to go to the body of your for loop. So it's going to execute that code of yours, and then it's going to come back to do the updation. So we'll see different cases that how exactly the updation, like what are the different cases that we have talking about the updation. But yes, you need to understand this flow chart, this particular flow diagram, that how exactly your for loop is working. So then it's going to do the updation, then again going to go back to the condition, check for the condition. If the condition is true, then yes, it's going to come back to the body of the loop. Otherwise, if the condition is false, then it simply is going to just exit out from this particular for loop. So we'll proceed further. Let's try to come back to the Eclipse screen, and we will do the for loop working. We'll see the for loop working, and then we'll try to understand this in a better way. Okay, so this is my int variable. So I will show you all of the cases. So as of now, let's just comment this out, and we will try to execute the for loop. So how exactly the for loop is going to work? So firstly, we will do the initialization. So I'm going to be just keeping my I variable to be as 0, and then I will do the just the condition check, which is my I less than 7. Then I will do the updation part, which is I++. So again, I'm going to be doing the same thing, which is system.println. Okay, system.out.println. Okay, so I'm going to be doing the same thing, which is okay, I value is okay. So that's pretty much done. Let's try to print out this particular thing, and we will see the differences and different types of the instances after that. So I'm just executing the code and see the output. So yeah, that's pretty much it, right? It's the same thing that we are getting, which we were discussing in the while loops. So yeah, that's the main thing. That's the main the only difference that we have done over here is the syntax part, which is the only difference that we have seen as of now. Otherwise, the execution is still the same, but you need to understand certain things over here. So as of now, I'm doing the initialization inside of this for loop. What if I'm doing the initialization? Okay, I'm removing this particular part, and I'm doing the initialization over here, which is inside of the main function. So this main function is having the meaning of I. So the whole code is going to be, the whole thing inside of the main function is going to be able to understand the meaning of y, and also talking about the for loop. But let's do one thing. Let's try to execute the code, and then we will see different cases. Okay, so I'm executing the code. I'm just keeping it as blank, and I'm able to see the output over here, which is like this. And okay, so as of now, we just need to make a note of over here at this point in time. So let's do one thing over here and put the semicolon over here. So I've just mentioned a semicolon over here. So what's going to happen? It's going to be the same thing, just like as the way we have done in the while loops. I put the semicolon right after my while loop, and the code was not able to proceed further. So that means the while loop got stuck. But over here, this is our for loop, and I've put the semicolon over here. So that means my for loop is going to be ending at this point. It's not able to find out, and it's not having any kind of a meaning. This curly, previously when we were not having the semicolon, then the for loop execution was up till this point. But now that I have put the semicolon over here, so that means the meaning of the for loop is up until this point only, and this is the only line which is having the for loop meaning, right? So the code is going to execute. Let's try to run the code, and basis on that we'll see the difference. So the code is going to execute, and it's only printing the value of I as 7. So what's happening? So I have initialized the variable as I equals to 2, right? And it's coming to the for loop. it's executing this particular for loop till the point the I is less than 7. It's updating the value, it's checking the condition, but yes, it's not able to proceed further just because of the fact I have put the semicolon over here, and because of this semicolon the for loop meaning is ending at this point in time. So as soon as the value of I becomes 7, it's just coming out of the for loop, that is coming to this particular point, executing this part of the statement inside of the code and printing the value of I as 7. That's how the code is working. So let's do one thing over here. Let's try to make a difference once again, and I'm just commenting this out. So that means the initialization has been stopped. So now I'm doing the initialization of the I, which is I equals to 0. So this means the system is not able to find out the value of I. I'm getting this error. The reason is simple. I have put the semicolon over here. I'm doing the initialization inside of the for loop, not for the complete main function. Previously, we were having the I value for the whole main function, but this time this I value is only defined inside the for loop. If I'm removing the semicolon, then yes, system is able to understand because the meaning of the for loop is now up until this point. But as soon as there is a semicolon, it's not able to proceed further. The I meaning is getting, ending just at this point, right at this semicolon. So that's the reason I'm getting this particular error at this point in time. So yeah, that's the main difference. That's the main case that I wanted to mention about. So yeah, so if I've shown you the execution, that you can just, whatever the things which are coming inside of your mind, you can try to just, make the changes, and basis on that, you can see the different types of the execution. So yeah, there is one point which I wanted to mention over here. We were discussing about the updation part, right? The updation or inside of the for loop is happening at the end of the code. So that means at this point in time, you can see the updation is done after the post incrementation. So even if I'm just doing this thing, if I'm incrementing with this particular scenario with the pre-incrementation, then it's not going to make any kind of a difference, being the output is going to be the same, because the updation is happening at the end of the code. I mean, after executing the body of the code. So that's the reason it's not making any kind of a difference. So that's the reason, even if I'm doing the post incrementation, even if I'm doing the pre-incrementation, it's not making any kind of a difference. But yes, if you will do this pre and post incrementation inside of the body, then yes, it's going to make some difference. The output may vary depending upon the scenario and depending upon the way you do the updation. So yes, that's pretty much about the for loop. And yes, we're going to be discussing some, this is the last that we are left with is the for each loop. So the for each loop is quite interesting, and you're going to be needing that for some particular specific instance. So let's go back to the presentation and see what we are left with and what is that we need to understand. So let me just open the presentation. Okay, for each loop. So for each loop is just another way of traversing technique like just the for loop, while loop, do while loop introduced in Java 5. So it was introduced in Java 5, and the syntax is going to be quite similar to for each loop. We will see what's the difference that we have in the for each loop. So the major thing that you need to keep a note of, that why do we need the for each loop? We need the for each loop specifically for arrays. Whenever we want to traverse the elements of the array in a specific way, in an easy way, then yes, we need the for each loop. Just for the simplicity, I mean, there is not much difference. You can also do the same things with your normal while and the for loops. It's just that if you want to, just make a hassle-free syntax and just to have some, an easy way, then yes, basis on that, you can use the for each loop. So instead of declaring and initializing a loop counter variable, you declare a variable. It's basically talking about the syntax. We will see this particular point. Just to keep a note of that, instead of declaring and initializing a loop counter variable, you declare a variable that is the same type as the base type. So you need to have the so we were doing the initialization part, right? So in order to work on a specific, let's suppose you're working on an integer type of array, having the data type as integer, then you need to have the variable with the same type. If you're working on a string type of array, then you need to have a variable which is of string type. You need to have the same data type, followed by a colon, which is the followed by the array name. If the body, you can use this loop variable you created. So it's again talking about the syntax. We will discuss about that in the Eclipse. So yes, let's go back to the Eclipse screen and see how do we need to work on the for each loops. It's pretty much easy, right? So let's do one thing. In this time we are doing the initialization of the array. So let me firstly show you about, okay, so let me firstly create the array with integer data type, then I will show you the string data type as well. So I'm just defining the variables as 1, 5, 6, 7. So that's what the array that I have created over here. I just need to, okay. So this is what the array that I've created, which is of integer data type. Let's try to understand the syntax first, then we'll proceed further. So let me show you the syntax first, and then I will do the rest of the discussion. So this is my int variable, which is of the same data type, just like as the way I have defined this array, which is of integer data type, having the elements as numbers, which is integers. So this is a simple syntax that we use for the for each loop. Okay, so this variable, which is I, right, it's gonna be pointing out to all the elements. So you don't need to initialize this variable because it's gonna be starting from the 0th location, starting from the 0 index of the array, and it's gonna be traversing till the end of this particular array. It's going to be traversing all the elements of this array till the time it's going to end, and it's going to be printing out all the value as per the execution that we need inside of the code. So yeah, at the time of the presentation, it was saying that in order to, so this means, okay, let's see one thing over here, system.out. Okay, so what I mentioned over here, I value is, so I am only printing the value of I, I'm not printing out the value of array, right? But yes, this I value is going to be pointing out to the elements of this array. That means if I'm printing the value of I over here, it's going to be printing the value of elements itself. Let's try to run the code and we'll see the difference. Okay, so as you can see that this is the output that we have received over here. It's going to be pointing out, it's starting from, okay, let me just make it. Okay, so I value is, the very first is 1, 4, 6, 7, 8, 5, all the elements. It has traversed all the elements till the last element, which is 3, right? And yes, what I'm doing is I'm not mentioning the array, I'm just mentioning the variable I, and even if I'm printing the value of I, it's pointing at all the elements and it's printing the elements of array. So that's the main thing that the syntax is, and that's the main thing that you need to keep a note of. So the next point that you need to keep a note of over here, let's see, I'm creating the array which is of string data type, and this time I'm gonna be just mentioning all the strings that we have. So I want to print Tom, Jerry, right? I want to print man, and what else do I want? Okay, so Jimmy, and let's just mention one more element, Kim. Okay, so this is what the string type array that I've created. So you need to keep a note of one thing over here. This time the data type of the array is string, so this means I'm gonna be getting error. The reason is simple. In order to point out the elements, I need to have the same data type because it's going to be storing the elements, right? It's going to be pointing out to the elements, so it needs to have the same data type. Previously, we were having the integer type of the array, so that's the reason we were able to point out those elements with the integer variable. But this time, the variable has to be string, otherwise it's going to give us the error because it's going to be storing, some kind of a storage has to be there, and that's going to be able to understand the meaning of those variables. So this means for the string data type, I need to have a string variable. Let's try to print the values. And yes, I'm getting the output as Tom, Jerry, man, Jimmy, Kim. It's pointing all the elements of the string data type, right? And that's what we need. We want to traverse the element from 0th location till the end. And we will also be doing a code. I'm going to be creating a separate video for that where we're going to be using this for each loop for some specific instance. But at this point in time, you just need to have this understanding. You can use this for each loop. You can make some certain changes. You can try to execute some different cases in order to understand this for each loop in a better way. So as of now, I just wanted to mention the syntax, just the basic meaning and the difference that we need. So yeah, that's pretty much it in this video. Let's come back to the screen. I don't think that we are left with anything. So yeah, guys, I hope I was able to explain you all the topics. I tried my best. I tried to explain all the different instances as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it in this video. I'm going to be making some separate videos where I'm going to be discussing some different projects. So yeah, that's pretty much it in this video. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your time and see you next time. Goodbye.